So, hello everyone. Last session before lunch, so we need to work through this. Usually what I do at Meet Magento is that I do like an update of what Magento Association has done in the last couple of months. But I figured that it might make sense to also do a dedicated session to explain what Magento Association is, why it's useful, and go through that. Yeah, so quickly about me, I'm Mathias Schreiber. I'm the Executive Director of Magento Association for roughly 2 years and a little bit, working out of Germany and attending like almost every Meet Magento event there is. So, moving on. I think it's important that we get a little bit of context about what happened to Magento over the course of the years. So we would need to take a look at the historical role of what Magento Inc. always used to do, right? So they provided a plan for active development and marketing. They participated in conferences, which does not only mean Meet Magento events, but also something like Shop Talk, for example, or the big e-commerce conference all around the world. There's always like a Magento booth happening, right? They're primarily focused on growing the company. That was the sole idea behind this. And they provided like a direction, priority management, basically what you do when you run a product-based company. This changed rather dramatically, even though people could see it happening after the acquisition. So what Adobe did was they were primarily focusing on Adobe Commerce, because that was the whole idea of the product to build. So they plan to phase out Magento as a product over time and now move it into a state of what Adobe calls a code base. Development people would call it a dependency, right? So Magento to Adobe Commerce is basically just a dependency, something that makes their product run, much like PHP or MySQL or stuff like that. And they, in the beginning, they had very, very limited support for Magento open source because, fun fact, it was never part of the sales pitch that there's like an open source community and an open source thing going on. Like nobody talked about it. However, things have changed in that regard that Adobe does a lot for Magento that I think often falls like under the radar. So what they're doing is they're keeping all the regular security updates up to date. And for those who've ever run an open source project themselves, know that security is a huge thing. It's not an easy undertaking. And I think Adobe deserves credit for that. Second big thing is we all know, hopefully, that PHP develops faster and faster over time with more functionality coming in. Keeping up to date with that is one of the tasks that nobody in an open source project likes to do. Because it's boring, nobody will write songs about you as the hero of code because you made it compatible with PHP 8.5 or something like that, right? Also, they're maintaining the backwards compatibility, which in regards to PHP and MySQL, for example, is a huge undertaking because the more the PHP versions drift apart that support Magento, the harder it gets to actually do those things. And last but not least, they supply substantial support, financial support to the community by sponsoring these events, by sponsoring Magento Association, and other things I cannot yet talk about, but there's a couple cool things coming up soon. So if we take a look at what actually makes an open source project, these are all just like rough numbers, right? But most people only think about code, right? We all meet on GitHub and, I don't know, in the Alps, snowboarding, whatever, and we just code away. And now we got a successful project. Nah, not quite. Because you need a lot of marketing effort. You need events like these to take place, developer-focused events, something like Mage Titans, for example, and you need administration tasks like somebody has to pay bills, right? Or file, somebody has to pay for this location, for example. That's basic admin stuff. What a lot of people don't understand is that this whole part, that's on the community now. That's what was historically done by Magento Inc. and will not be done by Adobe. So this is, if we want to be an open source project, it also comes with the not so fun part, right? So getting that out of hand, we have a couple of challenges ahead with that, because it seems that within the Magento ecosystem, a lot of people have a hard time phasing out of this, oh, now we need to do the boring stuff ourselves mindset. So what we had immediately after the whole acquisition is that we had like a leadership vacuum going on. Right? Nobody knew, hey, who's actually doing what, what's happening. Everybody was sort of in a wait state. Like thinking, okay, who's going to provide direction? And we also had a little bit of trouble with in regards to development responsibilities, like who is actually doing what? What is the community allowed to do? The interesting thing about that was that Adobe had to figure that out too, right? Because if you think about it, we as open source people, we just want to contribute code and be happy with it, right? But imagine being a lawyer within Adobe and somebody comes with the great value proposition, hey, somebody we don't know, only by his GitHub nickname LeadRoxor77, just provided some code to us. We don't know what it does, but we will deploy it onto all our customers. We are legally liable for, and it could or could not take down Home Depot globally. What do you think the lawyer will say? Nope. However, Adobe has figured it out, and it took them some time, of course. And at least we can contribute to the stuff. It's not as much fun as it used to be. I get it, because there's a couple legal hurdles we need to go through, and there's like an extra watchful eye in terms of code quality, etc. Things take a little bit longer, but it's way better than not being able to contribute anything. It's just that I always try to give like a little bit of perspective from Adobe's end as well, because it's easy to just take the piss at them and be done with it, but they're working really hard to make things like that happen. Then also, we have to figure out like marketing efforts, like what do we market, where do we market it, to whom do we market it, and there's a lot of issues in terms of wording, right? So Adobe has been going around all the conferences right now, advertising Magento for the small and medium-sized merchant. And there was a big uproar in the community, like, what? No, it's for the big merchants. It's like, yeah, but Adobe's definition of big is way bigger than your stuff. So what you could think is like super huge, for them is like mid-size. So it's also, it's again perspective, right? And then also we need to organize the conferences, even though I'm super happy, by the way, that we have one in France, finally. So the organization of conferences, like that's covered. However, if it works, yeah, it does. If we don't look at it from a negative angle, we have a lot of opportunities for growth that we can actually utilize, because Adobe isn't standing in our way in any way, shape, or form. There's a couple legal things we have to talk about. There's a couple things we are not allowed to do, like create a product from Magento, like Magento Enterprise, and then sell it, because that's what Adobe Commerce is, right? And we don't want to get in the way with that, and I'm fine with it. However, we can and should empower the community to keep working on the code base that we have, to be allowed to do conferences like this. There's currently efforts going on to have Magento booths on the big e-commerce trade shows. It's just that we as a community need to come together and figure out how we do it. So in the Netherlands, for example, it's 4 agencies and a solution provider that says, hey, you know what? We're going to build a booth, but we're just going to put a Magento logo on top as a show of force, because Magento is still a force in the e-commerce world to be reckoned with. And this is also a conversation that I often have with people that say, like, oh, Magento is dying. It's like, yeah. Think about it. How many open source projects do you know that actual real people, not developers, but actual real people use, that had $1 billion exit? Can you name one other than Magento? This is huge. And this is something where I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for what we actually have, and we're so in the details. And you know, all those little things, instead of taking back a step and taking a look at what we really have here with Magento. So what we can also do is we can still focus on innovation and flexibility, which is one of the strong suits of Magento, definitely. We should working on a stronger open source ethos right now, which is a tricky challenge, to be fair, because a lot of people just expect somebody else to do it, like all the boring parts. And I also believe that we can build a stronger ecosystem around it, because you can see it as like Adobe now owns Magento. That's a really strong argument to a merchant. When they have to figure out, like, okay, so what solution do we use? Do we use like Shopware or, I don't know, the WooCommerce or whatever, like all those standard open source competitors? Well, one of the three is backed by a global powerhouse in digital technology. And that's a huge plus, and we should leverage that. So moving on, in terms of what Magento Association does, so there's a couple of strategic things we need to do. We need to establish like a governance, like how do we work together? What's our code of conduct? What are our shared values? Stuff like that. We need to explore every piece of funding and resource we can get our hands on. That includes, of course, agencies, memberships, etc. But also, since it's now a pure open source project, we can tap into EU innovation funds, for example. And what we need for that is a couple European countries working together. Well, luckily, we have a global community, so that's really, really easy to do. Another thing Magento Association does is we're trying to enhance collaboration as much as we can, because some of the things in the workflows with Adobe are tough, but they're not set in stone. It's what we do is we are basically the connector between the wishes from the community and the wishes from Adobe, and try to figure out the common ground to just get moving forward so that we can merge more, because I think that's what most of the developers are looking for. And ultimately, we will be able to provide training and support. We want to bring Magento Association, we want to bring Magento certifications back, because right now we just have Adobe certifications, and the market for Magento open source is so big that we want to work on Magento certifications. And 3 days ago, I got an email from Mark Schust. Maybe somebody knows M Academy, right? I talked him into building an exam module, because right now you can do the trainings with him. And I said, hey, but if you have all the questions and stuff, you can just take an exam, and we'll make it the Magento exam. So we will be bringing back certifications in that regard. So little insight about how the funding works. We have the Magento Association leadership, which is the basic structure under that. We have board elections every year by now, and we have 3 new people on the board every year. Anyone can sign up. It's no like closed circle of people that just want to sit together and decide things. It's open for everyone. We want to ultimately hire staff for marketing and also management and development, right? So all the annoying parts in software development, writing tests, for example. We're currently exploring options to hire people to actually write the tests, because that seems to be like the biggest blocker to open source contribution. Everybody loves writing code, writing tests, meh, not so much. However, in order to make all this work, we need more members, and we need more sponsors, and we need more partners in Magento Association to keep this going. In terms of what the roles and the contributions of people are, if you're a member, you basically get voting rights plus a couple perks. You can show off the website. There's a couple discounts for certain extension providers, etc. If you want to sponsor something, that's where you can decide a specific field of work for Magento Association to work on. For example, you can sponsor marketing explicitly, or you can sponsor a development person specifically, because that's where you think your money is like most well spent. And then we have partners, technology providers like Platform SH, for example, or Varnish, hint, hint. We need to talk later. Yes, we have to. And this is basically how the ecosystem works. In terms of government and responsibility, what we're currently putting together is, together with Adobe, is what we call the Community Council. That is a rather small group. We think about 10, maybe 20 people who work together very closely with Adobe's engineering team and decide which pull requests to pick from the GitHub repository, foster them, and just get them going into the code base faster. That's something we want to do for the last couple years, but we still had to figure out a couple legal issues because it's not only the Magento 2 Magento repository, but there's also Page Builder and a couple other modules. And we had to go through like all the legal hoops with the lawyers. That's why I know the story so well, to get that going. We still want to make sure that Magento open source is enterprise ready, because Adobe Commerce is a great value proposition, but it's not a fit for every single merchant. And we don't think that size or revenue is necessarily the defining indicator of which platform to use, right? And of course, we want the community to be involved in the whole staffing process. So if you know people from your development team, maybe they're in your own agencies, that could be useful to work on the Community Council, you can talk either to Laura, Volker, or me, and then we can make this work. And of course, being one of the select few people in that group is also like a good sales pitch, right? If the merchant needs to decide which agency to choose, one agency has a couple of people on the Community Council, the other agency doesn't, it's easier to sell the company that has the people on board. This is important in terms of governance, because what we had in the last couple of years is like this Wild West scenario, which has its origin in this vacuum of leadership, because people just started doing whatever they felt was right. And that's also why Magento felt a little bit disconnected in between different countries, for example. So in Asia, Magento is perceived completely different than over here in Europe. And the same goes for America. And this is because everybody tried to do their best, like in their best interest genuinely, but we need to have like a proper structure to be perceived as what we are, which is one global open source project, right? So it's challenging, but it's necessary. I don't know who has kids, but rules are challenging but necessary, right? There's no way around it. So going on with that, there's also a responsibility that comes with running an open source project, which means that responsibility just doesn't stop halfway, right? You don't throw half-baked code into the repository as a pull request and say, that's it, I'm done here, right? We need to follow through and finalize the stuff that we do. And those opportunities obviously are coupled to actual work that people need to do. And we need to be committed on all tasks. I'm personally extremely happy that I have a couple of very dedicated people here. It's like Jakub and Ola and David who support us. Ola does the marketing stuff. Jakub puts a lot of work into code. David oversees all these things, even though I don't know how he does it with his schedule being so full. But we need to run this all for one and one for all approach, which I think originated in France, right? Wasn't it like the Musketeers thing? So good to be around here. So I'm just going to rush through the current activities, what Magento is doing Magento Association is doing right now. And then, how are we on the time?
1 minute, 20 seconds.
Who? Okay. Right. So we have Magento Open. No, I would still be fast. MagentoOpenSource.com is the current marketing website that we have. We're working on getting Magento.com back, but that's tricky with Adobe because this is now an asset to them, so they treat Magento.com like an office building. You know, we bought it, we've paid for it, that's it. We have the Meet Magento website, which you might have known if you changed the fr.meetmagento to www. So those are things that we did. We have Magento Association Hub, which is our e-commerce platform, proudly built on Shopware. Just kidding, it's Magento. And it's hosted by Platform SH for us. Very grateful for that. What we're currently working on is a Magento expert listing, or a professional service listing, whatever you want to call it, because we don't have that. Right now, you can only show expertise in Magento by being an Adobe partner. And I don't know who saw the latest development in how Adobe partnerships work. It's like, to quote Adobe, deeper relationships with fewer people. So this is where we will kick in and basically show it. How many else do I have? Right. Then Magento open source showcases. This is where I would strongly encourage everyone to drop us a note for every single store that you built with Magento, so that we can show it on the website. We don't. This is the only important thing, so I'm going to extend a little bit. We don't want any size limit on those showcases, right? Because if we only show like the super upper class, like Walmart, Home Depot, NASA kind of projects, the smaller merchants will feel alienated and say, that's too big for me. So that's why we want to go across the board to show what Magento can do in its entirety. And we're really, really close to launching that. And there will be some marketing effort going out to do that, and then just send in all your projects. It's easy to do the showcase, like super simple, domain, couple metadata, couple images, couple screenshots. Just send us the URL for the screenshots, we'll take care of the rest. If you want to do like a full-blown case study, be my guest, right? I love it, but it's not necessary, right? What we now need is a lot of volume to show what Magento can do. And then in terms of community engagement, we will bring the podcast back. The first episode has been recorded. We will have an open source contribution recognition program. So you might know that as Magento Masters from back in the day. Then we're working on swag so that we have like more clothes to wear, and we can finally bring like Magento themed clothing back. And we need to communicate better. That is true, need to be self-reflected here. In terms of the code initiatives, we want to merge at least one big feature per year. Well, this is just, we need to grow Magento Association. That's where we need everybody to be a member, of course. And how you can participate, of course, attend events like this, talk about it on social media. If Magento really pissed you off this afternoon, maybe don't talk. and you would underestimate that. It sounds fun. But however, with AI analyzing everything we talk about, every complaint that you just try to get out of your system on social media actually informs AI what Magento is. So that's why I really mean it. Like, if you want to complain, and I get it, right? I'm super passionate about it. I scream at computers all the time. Scream to a coworker. Well, maybe talk to them first, right? But don't put it out on social. But let's keep more positive notes of stuff that's actually going on. Yeah, basically just talk about all these things. And we will have a session later. I need to skip this really, really quickly. But Built by Bluefinch is something really, really cool. I'll just leave it up to you. That's enough teasing. That's the conclusion. Important stuff. The old times with Magento Inc. are not coming back. So Adobe will not be taking over the role that Magento Inc. had in the past. However, opportunities are up. We are willing to lead the charge. We need help for that. Yep, and that's pretty much it. This is the overall thank you, motivational slide. Ask ChatGPT to read it to you. And, oh yeah. Sorry about that.
If there is any Q&A, I hope he managed to convince people to contribute more. Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So we just send it to you, or there is a platform where people can...
Well, right now there's an email address, which is info@magentoassociation.org, but we will have a Google form up in, I think, maybe 1 or 2 weeks, where everybody can then just hand in stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so I will share with all my developers all this.
That would be good.
Anybody has questions? No?
Anybody hungry?
Yeah,
Because it's
anybody hungry?
lunchtime.
You can go.
Sorry
Thank
for
you very
keeping you
much.
here.
See you this afternoon for others.
Yeah, there we go.